The attack on Israel is a terrifying reminder of what can happen at a border that is built as secure. Despite this dangerous reality, the Biden administration, with the backing of Democrats on Capitol Hill, continues to allow illegal aliens, including military-aged men from adversarial countries, to overrun our homeland. Enough is enough. It is time for the incoming Speaker and House Republicans to unite behind their mechanism to fix this disaster. H.R. 2, securing America's borders, must remain a top legislative priority over the coming weeks. Most important, the border crisis should not be viewed as a problem that can be solved with more taxpayer dollars, a trap that has been laid alongside providing critical financial assistance to Israel. Lora Ries, who's the Director of Immigration and Border Security at the Heritage Foundation, write this piece. You know, there was a blow-up in the Senate today, and Sam Faddis is also joining us. Hello, Sam. Welcome back. And I just find it so shocking, Lora, that Democrats have such pushback on securing our border and putting teeth in legislation that would protect Americans from being vulnerable. Why?
Well, for them, it's about power. And not only do they assume that these illegal aliens will vote Democrat one day, but it is also about drawing congressional districts. If you think about the U.S. Census, one of the uses of that is drawing congressional districts. And the left has fought adding a citizenship question to the census. And yet you must be a U.S. citizen to vote. So if the census isn't going to ask citizenship, then it's going to count everyone who is here, including green card holders, temporary visitors, and illegal aliens, and then use those numbers to draw congressional districts, which means if you have a state with a very large immigrant and illegal immigrant population, you're going to have more congressional districts based on those numbers. Conversely, if you are a state with very low immigrant numbers, then you're going to have fewer congressional districts than you should. So right now we have congressional districts in California that simply shouldn't exist if the idea is representation based on citizenship, which is the only type of American who can vote.
And then we also had Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois today advocating illegal aliens serving in the U.S. military.
Yes, so apparently he thinks this is yet another job Americans won't do, and yet the left has worked very hard to undermine our own military, whether it was the COVID vaccination requirements or injecting wokeism into all aspects of our military. No surprise then, people are not keen to join the U.S. military or have their children join the military, even though they themselves have been in the military or are veterans. And so Senator Durbin is then therefore arguing, well, we should have illegal aliens join the military. Again, this is
to fast track them as citizens.
It is because in the immigration law right now, you can become a U.S. citizen faster if you are in the military than if you are not in the military. So yet again, this is more about power.
I mean, Sam Faddis, what do we say to these elected officials who've become an enemy to our nation? There's no other way, there's no other conclusion you can reach.
I agree with you, Armstrong. Look, they're completely out of touch. We're talking about the border as an example. Okay. The policy of the Biden administration, let's just say this out loud, is that borders don't exist. I mean, we do not enforce our immigration law, so we have moved to open borders. The Congress didn't vote on that. The American people didn't decide that. These guys just decided in a vacuum that they're going to do this. And this whole concept of the military, I mean, look, I think sometimes these analogies to the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire get overwrought. But this is a pretty clear one, right? The Romans went down this road. They started with an army that was representative of the people, citizens, soldiers who defended the Republic. And the next thing you know, they had an army of mercenaries and folks who owed no allegiance to the Republic, and the only allegiance they owed was to their commanding officers. We know how that story ended. Wasn't good for democracy, and we don't want to go down that road.
It's not good for democracy, Lora.
No, it isn't. And terrorists can exploit this. They have exploited this in the past. If they see a fast track either into the U.S. or to remain permanently, is to join the military, then they will do that. And then they can and have attacked fellow soldiers. So yes, this is not something that should be taken lightly, and we absolutely need loyalty to the U.S. and to their fellow members in the service.
Are the American people helpless in turning this around?
No, and many Americans are starting to wake up, and it's been very interesting to see Chicago and New York City, because those are two sanctuary cities where their mayors have been all in on sanctuary policies, which is allowing illegal aliens into their cities, and basically it's a don't ask, don't tell. They're not going to cooperate with federal law enforcement to have them deported. The result, as we've seen, are hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens during the Biden administration taken to these cities. They are now being overrun. They don't have enough housing. Unfortunately, these people are living on the street, and the residents there have had it, and they are speaking up, and they are going to city council meetings, and they are saying, look, housing was already limited, for example, on the south side of Chicago. What are you doing to us? Or we're having to compete for jobs, or you're taking away our rec center where our children practice football. So these mayors are simply asking for more money from the federal government. They're not reversing their sanctuary policies. The new Chicago mayor asked for $5 billion from the federal government to shelter the illegal aliens there. Unfortunately, it's become a racket for some of these mayors.
Sam, it's a business, and even whether you get the $5 billion or not, what many people in these communities are realizing that it's changing their identity, the value system of this community forever, because they don't necessarily have the same values. Much crime is escalating. Crime is being committed by them. So some of them who have no regard for life, no regard for the American system of virtues here. It is totally disrupting our way of life. And sooner or later, if this continues to happen, we won't even recognize America anymore in many of these places.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Armstrong. And here's the thing is that we've talked about this for a long time, I guess, as, hey, out there in the future someday, if we're not careful, we might confront this catastrophe. Well, the catastrophe's here. I mean, a large portion of the mass media, the corporate media, tries to just blank this out and not let the American people know what's going on. But we've reached a historic high in this country in terms of the number of people who were born abroad. I'm all for immigration. Everybody here is an immigrant one way or the other, right? But nobody has said we have open borders, the whole world can come. And the whole world is coming right now. And along with it, by the way, in addition to the strain on public resources, all the other stuff, which is definitely not inconsequential, it means we have no idea who's coming here. And you make a list of every enemy on the planet, well, you can feed folks into that stream with impunity, right? The number one group coming out of South America and Central America now is Venezuelans. I am certainly not saying that every Venezuelan coming here is a terrorist. But we know the Venezuelans hand full sets of false identity documents to Hezbollah operatives. So you're admitting every Venezuelan that shows up at the border, and you have no clue how many of those are just folks coming here trying to make a life, and which one of those guys is getting ready to blow up the World Trade Center or blow up the Sears Tower in Chicago.
You said something in your editorial that I want to come back to. I mean, you said, look at what happened on October 7th in Israel.
Right.
And those borders are not even open. Right. Those borders were supposedly secure. Here, come as you are. No identity, no COVID test, no test for disease or viruses you may be coming into the country. Wink, wink, just come in.
Right. And it has our FBI director, Christopher Wray, worried. He's testified multiple times that October 7th was
a wake-up call.
Yes, and that the FBI is taking very seriously the prospect that Hamas or other Iranian proxies will commit attacks here in the U.S. So the Biden administration has made Americans very vulnerable. We are back to a pre-9/11 posture, and Americans shouldn't have to wait for a terror attack for our leaders to act like it and to prevent it and to tell ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, go find these national security threats and arrest them, detain them.
Why is Mayorkas a threat also?
Because he's allowed this to happen. He's overseen it. And he just gaslights Americans and says the border's secure, that we are letting people in on a case-by-case basis, that they
Which is not true.
No, that they are just vulnerable populations, that this mass migration is just happening. Never mind that it's his policies that have invited them in.
It's your voice, your future. I'm Armstrong Williams. We're going to come back. Others will join this conversation. Don't go away. And welcome back to the broadcast. We're now joined by Micah Yan, author, analyst, war correspondent, and Robert Hillard Patillo, who is an attorney. I don't see Vaughn there, but anyhow, let me come back to something before I go to Robert. I just got this sent to me of a large group of mostly Chinese men illegally crossed through open gaps of the border fence in California just today. There used to be, which is way too many, about 1,000 crossing a month. What is that figure now?
Now it's up to over 7,000
Over 7,000.
Chinese, and the vast majority are military-aged men.
Military-aged men. They all have the same identical luggage, the same identical uniforms. What does that tell you?
It's organized and paid for.
By whom?
I don't know.
Robert Hillard, does this concern you?
Well, of course it concerns me, and I think that we should have been handling comprehensive immigration reform since the Schumer compromise in 2013, where Republicans walked away from it, or the Obama compromise in 2015, where Republicans walked away from it, or the Trump compromise in 2018, when Republicans walked away from it, or even last month when President Biden requested $15 billion to secure the border, and Republicans haven't even brought that to a vote yet. I think that we hear a lot of hyperventilating about the border, but we see very little action from Republicans when it comes to actually putting together the type of comprehensive immigration reform that's needed to actually fix the problem. And until we have the political will to not just simply fearmonger, to not simply blow smoke, but actually to do something, we're going to continue having this argument year after year. The last time we had anything done on immigration was Ronald Reagan doing amnesty in 1986. We need to really take this issue seriously, come to a bipartisan compromise that can deal with the border, deal with the dreamers, deal with a pathway to citizenship, unburden our court system, create a guest worker program that actually benefits all countries, and really work with our neighbors within our hegemonic sphere of influence to do something about the problem. But instead, we still see continuously Republicans treating this as a political volleyball that's great for election time, but nothing to do when it's actually time to legislate.
Micah Yan, you heard, before I go to Micah Yan, let me have you respond to Robert Hillard, who wants to blame this all on Republicans.
Well, currently, I mean, we're dealing with historic numbers. We're looking at about 10 million people right now when you include the known gotaways who have been encountered or have just evaded Border Patrol. And so to say that the Republicans are not trying to solve this problem is simply false. The House passed H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, in May. It would be extremely effective at preventing illegal immigration in the first place. but the Senate won't consider that bill. The Democrats right now in the Senate give lip service. They're saying they're willing to do a few things on border security, but really what they want is to have the Republicans take responsibility for this issue. And yet the Senate Democrats won't consider ending the gross abuse of mass parole. They won't stop the asylum fraud. They won't stop the unaccompanied children being enticed to come here. They won't stop funding the non-governmental organizations to the tune of billions of dollars to carry this all out. So if you want to solve the problem, there's 4 things that need to be done right there.
Robert, your rebuttal?
President Biden asked for $15 billion last month. Republicans instead have started saying they're going to launch an impeachment inquiry and investigate Hunter Biden. We talk about the Venezuelan migrants who are coming here. We pretend that Donald Trump didn't try to overthrow the Venezuelan government and place Juan Guaido in power less than 4 years ago. We have to start taking these issues seriously. We can just dust off the 2018 agreement that President Trump almost signed in February of that year. That would be the notorious S-whole countries comment meeting with Dick Durbin. We can dust that off and have it signed into law right now. We have already seen it pass the House of Representatives previously under Nancy Pelosi. The Senate has already said they would pass it. It does much of what was just stated with regards to the border, in addition to creating a pathway to citizenship, in addition to creating a stronger digital border and also physical barriers put in place. It also deals with this issue of unaccompanied minors and the Dreamers in a comprehensive fashion. So to pretend that somehow the Republicans want to get this done when all they're interested in is random conspiracy theories and using this as a political volleyball to kick back and forth, it's just antithetical to history. We've had compromises on the books for the last decade the Republicans have walked away from again and again and again.
Michael Vaughn, how do you respond to what you're hearing?
I'm downrange again, sir. I'm in Honduras. I just left Guatemala. Today I've been out looking, for instance, at the Canadian consulate actually is sharing space with IOM or OIM, depending on which language. OIM is basically the immigration pump for the United Nations. They're actually in the same building, the Canadian consulate here in Honduras. You just can't make up this stuff. I hear, I'm downrange all the time, whether it's Panama or Colombia or Morocco. I'm watching these things in Lithuania and all over the world. And what I'm hearing is a lot of people that think this is about politics. And I'm here to tell you, I'm a war correspondent. Sam Faddis and I read his information all the time. I share information with Sam all the time. You need to pay attention to Sam. And also Heritage Foundation, Lora. I don't actually know Lora, but I do pay attention to Heritage. But I'm downrange constantly. Year after year, I spend the vast majority of my time outside of the United States. We are at war. This is a hybrid war. This is not about conspiracy theory or scare tactics. If you bury your head in the sand, you are going to die, and I mean die. And this is coming from somebody who spent a lot of time in war and constantly comes and goes out of wars. This is actually a replacement population. This is not about I was in the Walmart here earlier today in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. I put that up on Twitter or X some hours ago, and it's just showing the food section and whatnot. And people are dialing in from all over the United States saying, hey, that's better than the Walmart I'm at. Right across the street from me, outside my hotel window, is a TGI Fridays, right? So we've got this idea that all these countries these people are coming from are actually poor and they're starving to death. But let me tell you, the Venezuelans who are coming through, which is the vast, by the way, Laura mentioned something about 7,000 a month coming through. I think she may have misspoken. It may be 3 times that number per day. Nobody actually knows. We're talking, it could literally be 20,000 per day at this point. And that is a directionally accurate number, at least. Nobody knows. Homeland Security doesn't know how many are coming through. That's the northern border, the southern border. I'm telling you, the Darien Gap is being opened up right now as we speak. They're putting 2 new camps in. And for those who know what the Darien Gap is, you should see the infrastructure down in Ecuador, down in Colombia. The infrastructure for the aliens to come through is being built, and it has been being built for a long time. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas has come down to to Panama with fistfuls of cash, helping to build that infrastructure to increase the rate of flow of people coming to the United States. That doesn't include the CBP One app. CBP One app is an app that people can just fill out on their phones, or if they don't have a phone, the Department of Homeland Security will help them. They can fly directly in from Guatemala or directly in from Colombia and other places, all into the United States. We're talking hundreds of flights per month, all over the United States. This doesn't include the people coming across the northern border or coming across, washing up on the beaches of Florida. For instance, one Chinese man that we met earlier this year, or let's say intercepted, coming out of the Darien Gap, his name's Lushan Zhao. He said that he bought a boat and interviewed him for an hour and a half. He'd just come through the Darien Gap. He had just come through Colombia, and before that, Quito, Ecuador. But we intercepted him coming at the best time to question people, as Sam Faddis will know from his CIA background, is at nighttime when they're alone, especially when they're hungry and emotional. I caught him when he was very angry and calmed him down a bit, and he talked for 90 minutes. He talked about buying a boat in the Bahamas for $5,000 from a Scotsman. He said he was coming to Florida with his father, and he ran out of fuel. He said the U.S. Coast Guard picked him up. I confirm that. The U.S. Coast Guard did, in fact, pick him up. He said that he was deported back to the Bahamas and that he then was being deported back to China, but he then flew to, his name was Lushan Zhao. He then flew, his English was perfect, by the way, and his body language was very good. And he could almost blend in if somebody didn't know what they're looking for. But in Cuba, he changed his flight from, instead of going from Cuba to China, he flew to Quito, Ecuador. Now, there's an entire ecosystem, hotels and snakeheads, as they call them, coyotes, all the way through Quito, all the way up through Colombia, through Panama, the Darien Gap, up through, next is Costa Rica, of course, then Nicaragua, and then they come up through here, Honduras, then they go to Guatemala, where I just left a couple of days ago, and then they go to Mexico, and then they end up in towns around the United States. The Chinese have their own ecosystem within ecosystems, and different ones go to different places. For instance, the Fujianese speakers go to some places, the Mandarin speakers go to others. And anyway, we could talk about this for days, but the bottom line is this is an actual invasion. When I leave places like Panama,
let me get Sam. Sam, do you listen? I heard Lora say there's 7,000 Chinese. That doesn't account for everybody else that's coming in. Is it an invasion? Is it at war? How do you respond to what Michael is sharing with us?
Yeah, well, when Michael Jan's done speaking, usually what I say, Armstrong, is amen, because, and I'm not trying to be smart, because the man is in the middle of the thing, on the ground, overseas, all day, every day. Look, let's just cut out any nonsense about the fact that we're dealing with some kind of issue at the border and all we need is a new piece of legislation and a compromise. That's garbage. I'm sorry, it's not true. We have laws in the books, we're not enforcing them. This administration has decided we have open borders. People are flooding into this country at unprecedented levels. And they're coming in a lot of cases with a lot of money and a lot of backing. And as one of the guests said earlier, one of the key things is nobody's asking the single most critical question in intelligence work, which is why? Like, you got a guy who Michael was just talking about who has enough money to buy a boat in the Bahamas, and then he comes to Florida, but he gets caught and he goes back to the Bahamas, but he's now got enough cash to go to Ecuador and then start all over again and make his way back. So the narrative from the left is these are unemployed factory workers or something that can't feed themselves in China. But this guy's got enough cash to jet all over the world, buy boats, and then retool and restart in Ecuador. You guys are talking, as everybody is, about how overwhelmingly what we see now are men, unaccompanied, in the prime of life. In many cases, as Jan has said on a number of occasions, kind of look like they handle themselves, have the same gear, they come out of the jungle, they're in good order. Like guys maybe were trained to do this. Okay, so somebody somewhere ought to be scratching their head saying, what the heck is going on here, man? Where are you getting the money? Who's putting you up to this? Where'd you get the plane tickets? How'd you learn to make your way through the jungle in Panama and walk out in good order? Why are your clothes in a dry bag inside your backpack like they teach you to do in jungle warfare school? Anybody asking any of those questions? No. What they're doing is processing them, giving them a shower and a meal, and then helping them move on to Chicago or New York. That's what's happening right now. We are being invaded. And this government, as Michael has pointed out, is actually making it happen. They're not just letting it happen, because this conveyor belt of camps all across Central America, run by UN agencies and NGOs, look at who pays the bills for that. It's the American taxpayer is funding that conveyor belt. So we're not just letting them in, we're actually bringing them here.
And we'll be back. Your voice, your future. I'm Armstrong Williams.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion. And that is, there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Laura, it appears after listening to Jan and Sam Faddis, it seems as though our dollars are accelerating what they're doing. Our dollars.
That's right. And so right now, the White House has asked for another $13.6 billion just for border security, and their supplemental. It's what's in front of Congress right now. But think about what this administration has done the past 3 years. They've just processed in millions of illegal aliens. So giving them another dollar is just going to accelerate the same approach, the same open border agenda and operations. We need to close the loopholes that they exploit, the asylum fraud, the unaccompanied children, the mass immigration parole, and defund the NGOs that are carrying this out. Frankly, we need a lot more Jans down in South America and Central America tracking this, because in that same White House supplemental request for the $13.6 billion, the White House explains that a good chunk of that money would go to Central America to set up more mobility offices. So draw more people from around the world to Central America, help them apply for, use that CBP Mobile One application, and basically schedule their illegal immigration into the U.S. But it keeps drawing people towards our border instead of using the long existing U.S. refugee process in that program.
You know, Robert, do you think this administration understands the consequences of their actions and what is actually happening with this money? You're empowering people to ultimately destroy our way of life?
That's a ridiculous question, Armstrong, and you know
maybe
that.
To you it is. Not to everybody else, though,
no one is trying to destroy our way of life. This is the fear-mongering that we're talking about when we have these conversations on immigration. The reality is that you have countries that America has had a hand in destroying over the course of the last century. And because of this, people are fleeing those areas in order to find a better life. The NGOs that you're talking about are setting up food and water stations for people who have sold everything they own to walk 1,000 miles, to have the same freedoms and liberties that we talk about in the United States of America. The reason people are backed up in our asylum process is we don't fund the asylum system. We don't have enough judges. We don't have enough lawyers. We don't have a causeway by which people who are legitimately seeking asylum can get in. And when we talk about the needs to actually fund the border, Democrats agree. Let's fund the border, but let's also fund a pathway to citizenship. Let's also fund DACA reform. Let's also fund H-1B visa reforms. Let's also fund the guest worker program. Now let's have a comprehensive bill that actually gets these things done. And I have not heard one solution from anyone talking about all this fear-mongering. We're being invaded. It's the Roman Empire. Alaric the Great is at the door. They're knocking out the door. The Sicilian pirates are coming through the Mediterranean. All of that, no one has given a solution yet. The solution is the actual legislative process that we have in place that can actually fix these issues, but they don't want that. Do you know why? Because the corporations that fund the Republican Party enjoy the illegal immigration system that we have right now, where you can pay people below the table, below minimum wage, to keep our agricultural industry going, to keep our hotels going, to keep our restaurants going, because that's what makes money for Republican donors. They don't want to actually fix the system. If they did, they would have agreed to the compromises in 13, 15, 18, and 20 that we had on the table. And right now we can come to an agreement on what can be the outlines of a comprehensive immigration reform bill that will both secure the border, stop the level of asylum seekers, that will actually streamline the system, that will actually fix the problem. But that is not of interest. Fear-mongering is of interest, not solutions.
Jan, how do we respond to our brother, Robert?
Robert, come with me. I'll take you.
I've been.
Right now.
Hold on. I will tell
come down with me.
Hold on.
Come down with me. I'll pick you up at the airport tomorrow, and I'm dead serious.
Give me a second. I should have mentioned that. I've actually I work with NGOs to work with Haitian migrants. I've been to El Paso. I've been to Brownsville, Texas. I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to Port-au-Prince. I've been to Panama. I've been to Guatemala City. I've been to San Salvador. I've been there. I've done the work.
But have you gone staying in 4-star hotels? Have you been in the trenches?
I've been in. You really think I can afford working for a nonprofit being in the 4-star hotels, Armstrong? I'm not you.
I just want to make sure you're in the trenches and you're seeing what Michael is facing every day.
And we are handing out food. We're handing out water. We're processing people's asylum paperwork. We're finding out what people are fleeing, whether it's domestic violence or if it's terrorism. We are talking to the people on the ground to fix the problem. I'm not going to Guatemala on vacation just to hang out. It's about fixing the issues that exist and actually trying to make a difference in the lives of these human beings, not migrants, not illegal aliens, human beings who are seeking to not have a better life for themselves and their children. And we can have a legislative solution. We can actually fix that, or we can keep talking about we're being invaded and all of a sudden our way of life will be destroyed because there's hungry children.
Go ahead, Michael.
Invaded. This is a hybrid war. We're being invaded. And this sort of warfare has happened many times in the past, and it's happening right now. And I assure you, they are coming to kill you. They are not coming to argue with you. They're not coming to steal your vote. They're coming to replace you. This is very obvious. They're doing the same across Europe. Often I go over to places like Netherlands and I watch the same thing happening there. And it's happening in key places. For instance, Panama is being taken right now. The Chinese Communist Party will do to Panama exactly what they've done to Tibet and what they've done or what they're doing to Xinjiang. They'll do the exact same thing. They'll do the same thing over in Netherlands. Netherlands is key terrain because of those two harbors that Armstrong and we talked about the last time we talked to Armstrong. The two major harbors there that Sam has talked about quite a few times, Rotterdam and Antwerp, the two biggest harbors in Europe, 2 of the top 10 in the world. So you've got Netherlands being flooded right now with massive amounts of aliens. They're working to build something called Tri-State City, by the way. And Tri-State City will be a giant smart city for 30 million people. And by the way, the reason I'm in Honduras is this is another key terrain. For instance, anyway, we could go on for hours about this. I should probably save that for another time. But at the end of the day, this is not about you have people coming in from countries, for instance, that going through Mexico. When I was in Belize recently looking at this, when I went across the border into Mexico several times, the first big store you come to is a Sam's. I needed an SD card for a camera, and I go to Sam's, and I didn't have a Sam's card. It was $100 or whatever for that. So I went to a Walmart. And what I'm getting to is a lot of these people that supposedly are fleeing terror and whatnot, and fleeing starvation, are passing by Taco Bells and McDonald's and TGI Fridays and Starbucks and Walmarts all over the place. country after country. They're going through very safe terrain. Americans come down here and live down here and start businesses down here. Same in Guatemala. Same in Costa Rica, of course, and Panama. And so Ecuador, Colombia, there are Americans that move to Colombia all the time.
So Michael, in fairness to Robert Hilliard's statement that no one is offering solutions today, what are the solutions?
Close the border. I'm offering a solution. Close the border. Many people say it can't be done. For instance, Panamanians will say that all the time. But that's untrue. They closed the border during the COVID lockdown. Nobody got through Darien Gap, zero. In fact, they pushed people back and people stopped coming. When I was in Lithuania before the war kicked off with Russia, I was warning about that war because of the weaponized migration that was happening there. The people they tried to get into Poland. Poland said, no, you can't come in. And then Belarus started pushing people into Lithuania. And Lithuania asked me, actually, because I spent 5 weeks there. I was with them in Afghanistan before, so there was some level of trust. I was with their army in the Afghan war. So they asked me what I would do because they know I'm watching these weaponized migration issues all over the world. And I said, close the border. Do not let any more in, right? Push them back, build a wall. And they did. So you'll see when I was in Lithuania, if you were to web search, you'll see that's the time when Lithuania started pushing people back to Belarus and people stopped coming. They will stop coming. We're feeding the ducks. And the problem is the organizations, for instance, the OIM and the UN and all this, they're captured by the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party, who are co-sanguinated. They work hand in glove. We talked about this last time, Armstrong. And the United States government, much of that is also captured by the World Economic Forum and the CCP. These NGOs are doing this in broad daylight. Down in Panama, I'll take Robert down there. You'll see that they've taken the NGOs like OIM, Red Cross, HIAS, and all these groups. They've taken the old U.S. military headquarters right next to the Panama Canal. It's a beautiful campus called City of Learning in Spanish, right? And this is another one of those future smart cities. They're making these smart cities everywhere. That's why I'm in Honduras. They're again, not to go into that, deep diving into that, but the Chinese, anyway, bottom line is you've got corporate interests here that want to take over entire cities and run the cities under corporate rules.
So Michael, let me do this. So you know, I think this is such an important conversation, Lora and Sam and Michael and Robert, is that there are people who don't believe that we are being invaded. They believe that we're spreading fear-mongering. I mean, Sam Faddis spent so many years running the CIA's weapons of mass destruction. He's had access to things that we would never, ever in our lifetime even come close to experiencing and being exposed to. So, Sam, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to also ask Lora the same question. Are we fear-mongering? Are we overreacting? Are we using too strong of a word here like invasion, and they're here to kill us?
We are most definitely not fear-mongering, right? You just made reference to weapons of mass destruction. If I was sitting in my old job in the current climate, somebody calls me into a meeting and says something like, what kind of threats could come across the southern border? What are you worried about? What would be my answer? My answer would be, where do you want me to start? Anything imaginable could come across the southern border. I mean, can we be serious? There is no border. There is no enforcement. The worst that happens is you get grabbed and they check your name against a database that has no data in it, so it's going to return a no hits, right? We don't have a magic database. And then they move you on to Chicago or New York. So make a list of every horrible thing on the planet that could come across that border, from nuclear weapons to teams of saboteurs. It's all there. But look, let's just go back to a more prosaic level. I'll agree with your other guest on this. There are a lot of people, including a lot of Republicans, that for very mercenary reasons don't want to control this. We actually have a huge garment industry in the United States of America now. It's primarily in Southern California. If you go into one of those sweatshops and you find somebody who's in there making clothes in America who's actually a legal immigrant, I'll give you $1. I mean, Everybody there is illegal. Why? Because they work for less than minimum wage off the books, and nobody complains about working conditions. Nobody complains about safety. Same with chicken processing plants down in Alabama, man. People 12 hours a day on their feet, living 12 people to a mobile home. Nobody will complain. I mean, to that extent, this is a modern day slave trade. And yeah, there's a lot of really powerful, rich people that want it to go on. And it's obscene, honestly.
You know, I want to come back. I want to come back to Robert because I have a lot of respect for Robert. I want to try to understand, because I think it's so important for us to have this dialogue, why you would think that we would engage in fear-mongering and also just hyping this up. And the reality is that you're talking to someone like Michael, who travels and see this firsthand. You're talking about the former head of the weapons of mass destruction, and you're talking about Lora, someone who spent her career in this area of immigration and border security. Because we don't use our platforms to hype things up. We have to deal with the reality, and sometimes the truth is a tough medicine to swallow when you face the reality of what is happening with our open and porous borders. We'll be back on Your Voice, Your Future. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
So, Robert, I come back to you because I really believe that we're back to pre-9/11.
Well, you know, you bring up 9/11. I think that's a perfect example when we talk about fear-mongering. We talk about they're coming here to murder us. I think someone said, we're feeding the ducks. Someone else said whether they can bring all sorts of any horrible thing you can imagine. How is saying that someone will bring any horrible thing you can imagine not fear-mongering? And if we look at the 9/11 terrorists, none of those people came across the southern border illegally. If you look at the first bombing of the World Trade Center, none of those people came across the southern border illegally. If you look at what the FBI said about the biggest terror threats to Americans, they said that white nationalist extremists were the biggest terror threat to Americans. You can look at the Buffalo shooting where you had 10 African Americans murdered. You can look at the Charleston shooting, the Mother Emanuel AME Church where we had 9 black people killed. You can look at Jacksonville earlier this year where we had 3 African Americans killed at Family Dollar. And I can name the people who were killed in those terrorist attacks by white nationalist extremists. So to say that there are people nefariously coming across the southern border, they're bringing every imaginable thing that could hurt us with no evidence behind it, how is that anything except for fear-mongering? And the most important part of it is, we can have a solution to these problems. There's a legislative solution on the table right now. If Republicans will just come to the table and vote to give President Biden the $15 billion that he asked for, might have been $13.6 billion, nearly $15 billion he asked for, and we actually took immigration reform seriously, if we actually talked about comprehensive border security that will shut down the problem, if we worked with our partners in our hegemonic sphere of influence to actually deal with the pipeline leading into these issues, help to promote some political stability in Central and South America, we can actually get to a solution. But by saying that, well, somebody's coming across the southern border, they have a lightsaber and the Death Star with them, they're going to blow us all up and kill us and they're going to destroy the Roman Empire, how is that not fear-mongering? And this is why we have to have rhetoric that actually matches the situation that we are dealing with and have solutions-based problems. Solutions that can actually fix the issue, not simply talk about a parade of horrible to scare people at night.
Sam, your response?
So I did say anything you could imagine. Just for the record, I did not contemplate that would include lightsabers. So I guess we can cross that off the list. Look, I think the issue is we are in an identical posture in terms of 9/11 in the sense that it is crystal clear what the danger is. You can see the lights on the locomotive and you're standing on the track. I was working counterterrorism in the years up to 9/11. We lost 2 embassies in East Africa. We almost lost the USS Cole in Yemen, and about every 5 minutes, Osama bin Laden said, I'm taking this fight to the far enemy, which was clearly us. Over and over and over, and we stood still on the tracks until we got hit. Okay, we are doing, in that sense, intellectually exactly the same thing, right? And if we're going to be intellectually honest, I mean, we have open borders at this point, but we won't say that out loud because the administration understands that that's illegal, so they have to keep pretending otherwise. If we're going to have open borders, then cool, let's have open borders. When I lived in India, they took a poll, 85% of the population said if they could immigrate to the United States cost-free and legally tomorrow, they would do so. So the population, let's just call it 1 billion. That's 850 million people in India alone will come to the United States. So stop making them climb through the Darien Gap. Let's just start landing jets in New Delhi and Mumbai and loading them up, and then figure out where you're going to put, by the time you're done, billions. I mean, obviously, as a matter of common sense and policy, we have to have borders. We have to enforce our laws. We're not doing it now, and we're just lying about it. And actually, that's too kind, because as I said before, we're not just letting them come in. As Michael Yon documents every day, we're actually bringing them here. We're paying them to bring here.
Lora?
I agree, and I don't believe FBI Director Christopher Wray was fear-mongering when he's testified multiple times the past few weeks that he is very concerned about the terror threat we are facing, particularly since October 7th, and the leaders of Hamas and Iran and their other proxies have called for similar attacks in Israel, in the U.S., etc. So we have to take them at their word and act accordingly. Americans should not have to wait for a terror attack for our leaders to act. We know what the conditions are, and Congress needs to act accordingly and preemptively tell ICE, give ICE the funding and the direction to go find the national security threats we've let into the U.S. and to detain them to prevent an attack.
Michael?
Yes, sir. Well, you can see we are in a state of war. It is a hybrid war. A lot of people see it. A lot of people don't. I think more people see it now than did before. But at this point, I mean, I actually call it fear-mongering or whatever you want. But I mean, the bottom line is war is about conditions, right? A lot of people ask, you know, what will be the spark that actually kicks this thing off? Well, it's all about conditions. Amateurs are always talking about sparks. We're clearly watching the world go into a food crisis, right? You can see it with the nitrogenous fertilizer production being slashed and cut. You see Groningen gas field in Netherlands has been cut this year. You see the energy, the greenhouse people trying to cut U.S. natural gas off. The natural gas is very important for creating nitrogenous fertilizers using the Haber-Bosch process, something we talked about before, Armstrong, where you take the hydrogen off the natural gas, combine it with the nitrogen that's in the air that we're breathing, and you make ammonia. And in 1914, when this began in Germany at Ludwigshafen, you see that the world population exploded then. That actually is the year that the Panama Canal opened as well. It wasn't just because of nitrogenous fertilizers and the Panama Canal and that sort of thing. There was also better medicines and refrigerations and that sort of thing. But the bottom line is the nitrogenous fertilizers are very important. And we see that under attack. When we see the food prices going up, as they are now all over the world, that creates that hop. The hop is the human osmotic pressure. The human osmotic pressure is the push and pull of migration. So as we see all these routes being facilitated and opened up, again, like Sam has mentioned, we're not just allowing it to happen. We are facilitating. We're making it happen. We're building camps for them to do it, and so is the Chinese Communist Party, right? We are actually not just allowing it. We are putting them on the buses at Yuma, McAllen, Texas, all these places, San Diego. You see Border Patrol every day when I'm down there, loading them on the buses. Just doing my job, sir. Loading people into the United States, even as we are clearly going to go into very serious food problems, global problems, for many reasons. But the bottom line is when you look at this hybrid war, The highest level of warfare, as you know well, is information war, right? That's the highest level of warfare. And the information warfare is intense, whether it was with the jab mandates and we couldn't say what we thought about those sorts of things being censored, and just the intense information war that's allowing these borders to be open.
Let me do this for you, Michael, because in the interest of time. Sam, your latest article in A&D magazine is that Al-Qaeda is attempting to acquire nuclear weapons?
Yes, sir. That is the latest information we have from multiple sources on the ground in Afghanistan, including, a guy outside of Afghanistan who's a former chief of intelligence for Afghanistan who has sources inside Afghanistan. So the governor of Nuristan province, who is technically a Taliban governor, but is also a senior member of Al-Qaeda because those organizations are now tied up at the hip, is meeting with individuals about the prospect of buying or stealing a Pakistani nuclear weapon, or perhaps more than one.
So, Robert, what would you recommend to the Biden administration to do, especially on the foreign and the border front, to make our country safer and less vulnerable?
Oh, absolutely. I think the President Biden needs to sit down with Speaker of the House Johnson, sit down with Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, with Minority Leader Jeffries, and actually put together a comprehensive immigration reform plan that will address many of the issues that have been presented today. I don't think Democrats deny that there is an issue. It's just we have a divergence in how the issue should be solved. I think this idea that we're simply going to put up a giant wall, Game of Thrones style, to keep people out, I don't think that's a tenable solution that people believe in. And in addition to that, it does not solve the fact that most of the shipping containers that come into America are never checked. It does not solve the fact that we have most of the Chinese illegal immigrants that come to the United States of America to buy plane tickets and just overstay their visas. It does not change the fact that we do not have a guest worker program that both supports the small businesses that depend on migrant labor, but also puts guide rails in place that will fix the problems as they exist. And I think that we can have a real adult conversation about these things that is not based on fear, that's not based on anger, then we can come to a solution that will fix many of these problems. And I think that that is the conversation that needs to be had in the United States of America, a solutions-based conversation. And I think that gets us where we need to go.
Lora, will we get an immigration bill with real teeth in it?
Well, that's the question. And unfortunately, it seems like too many senators are willing to do a little bit and then go home and say, yes, we passed border security, but it won't actually solve the problem. And so until we are preventing illegal immigration in the first place, we're not going to have a secure border. So, and then Republicans will own this issue, Democrats will be let off, and we won't be dealing with this issue or allowed to legislate on it for at least another decade. We are at historic levels. We're talking about 10 million people right now. We are facing real national security threats, and the members of Congress, particularly in the Senate right now, need to act like it, uphold their oath, and protect Americans.
Lora, Sam, Michael, Robert, I cannot thank you enough for bringing your insights and your experiences to this conversation today, because, you know, America should be first again, and we should always protect the interests of our fellow Americans. Thank you all for joining us for this edition of Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams.